So I'm joined by Sophie Bull, digital e-commerce manager at Bonmarché and Peacocks. So Sophie, the customer experience seems to have become so much more important. And in the report, we can see that 89% of marketers say that. But at the same time, about 56% are saying that ROI doesn't seem to be as important to prove investments in customer experience. So would you agree with that? Is that what you're seeing as well?
I think it's a twofold question. I think absolutely customer experience, super important and becoming more and more increasingly important. I think the question on ROI and justifying that really depends on where you are as a business and what business you're talking about. So in my situation, I absolutely need to justify an ROI through customer experience because under anything, my role is to make a profit, putting the customer needs first to drive a profit. So if something I'm working on, a project, anything such as customer experience developments or innovation, if that isn't going to help us to make that profit, then I'm not going to secure any investment for it or any funding for it moving further. I think there are some businesses and some circumstances where specific developments in customer experience are really purely focused on that brand and the brand sentiment and increasing brand awareness. But I think on the whole, if we were to look at customer experience as one, I do think it needs to have a justifiable ROI on it. And I think from a marketer, if I know that I have worked on something or my colleagues and peers have worked on something that's been able to drive not only the brand sentiment, brand awareness, but an ROI, I think we should shout about it. I think that's a really good news story for the idea of customer experience. And there are still a lot of companies that aren't investing in customer experience at the minute. They still don't understand or see the benefit of these innovations. And they're still in kind of the mindset of, I'm still selling a product. My website's easy. You can click on it and buy it. Well, actually, we know when we're looking at sort of the trends, well, it's not the best website. It might not be the best user experience, but they're still making a profit through the product. So they don't really see the need to invest in the experience. So I think actually, if we can prove that these developments are driving ROI, then we need to talk about it. We need to sing about it. I think it helps everyone in the industry to get their businesses to focus more on the benefit of customer experience.
Yeah, and talking specifically about the improvements. So one more thing that stood out to me in the report was that the primary challenge that's holding brands back from delivering better customer experience seems to be this customer understanding and customer insights, which almost like higher than kind of a personalization, segmentation, targeting. So it almost seems like it's a prerequisite. Like, do you agree with that? And what's your experience?
I totally agree. I like to suggest that sort of all the work I do as a digital marketer and then previously as more of a pure traditional marketer is underpinned by insight. I think, yes, we can say, oh, okay, so this person A was browsing trousers and then clicked on Facebook straight after. So let's retarget her with a trouser ad on Facebook. Okay, that's brilliant. And yes, that's a snapshot of understanding the customer in that moment. But I don't understand through that why she was looking at trousers. I don't understand that why she's chosen Facebook as a social media platform to then look at. I'm not really understanding the intent. And I think the point of insight and needing to really understand the customer isn't just understanding the customer when they're with you and your business and interacting with you. It's understanding your customer as a whole and really understanding the lifestyle, what's driving the purchasing behaviors that aren't linked to purchasing, but are linked generally towards culture. And I think if we truly start to understand the why, then we can really start to position ourselves and target them properly. So not just, oh, you were looking at trousers, here's a trouser. Oh, well, actually, you were looking at trousers because next week you're going on holiday, or you search quite often to go on holiday. So we know that you go away a lot. It's understanding really what's building these purchases intent to really drive the right product to that customer. So I'm all for customer insights. I think, I've worked in I've worked for Tesco, massive marketing team, which is so focused on customer insight. And then I've moved now to my role now, which doesn't have its own insight department just because of the size of the business, which is so understandable. And I think the value that I learned at Tesco of what insight can actually drive is definitely one we need to pull into the business now. I think a lot of people think they know their customer because they've either been doing it for so long and they've got all the experience, but they don't. And I think with how things are changing at the minute, the last 12 months, key example of how purchasing can change, that's just going to keep happening. People have had their eyes opened over the last 12 months with their ability to shop online, or actually, no, I don't want to shop online. I do want to physically see the product now and go back onto the high street. I think now more than ever, we are really becoming aware of the absolute asset of customer insight and how that can drive everything, in my opinion. I'm an absolute advocate of customer insight.
Yeah, and obviously, I think many people that will listen to this think, well, pulling customer insights in the business sounds like such a simple thing to do, but it's quite a complex challenge, right? And I think one of the really things that I think are going to be really kind of a surprise people is that one of the main things that brands say that's holding them back from delivering better customer experiences. In fact, 57% of respondents said that. And that was the talent, right? So did they feel like the talent that they have currently isn't good enough? But at the same time, what we found is that talent improvements have delivered the least success for improving customer experience. Well, what do you think of that?
I think so. That was a really interesting point when I read that. And I think it's twofold. I think you can, as a business, have access to all the technology, all the insight, all the data, but you might not necessarily have the talent that can use all of this data and turn it into actionable insights and recommendations. On the flip side, you could have colleagues who are absolutely fantastic at driving growth through customer insight and really digging deep into the data and working through data from various platforms and pulling it all together. But they might not have the access to that technology to do that, or the data. And I think actually the sweet spot for me is when you have the access to the technology and the data, and actually you have someone that can work with it and drive recommendations to a business based on that data. I don't think it's one or the other. I think where I am now in a business, we don't have access to a lot of technology from an insight perspective. We don't have subscriptions to lots of research platforms. We don't have that. So it's more of a kind of having to get a bit fast and dirty with the research and sort of do a lot of it ourselves. And I think actually, yes, it's not ideal, but for now it's working. So I think if you don't have the technology, but you have colleagues that are used to data and used to looking at it and using it and really driving with the data, I think you can almost get around the technology. You can curb some of the gaps, not all of them, but some of them. And I think actually, yeah, talent for me is key over the technology, 100%. But the ideal is to have both at the same time and have them both work off each other.
Yeah, absolutely. But why do you think it was such a high number of respondents said that talent didn't actually provide the required improvements? Would it be because they don't have the technology to support the talent to start with?
I actually think that there's a layer to this in the sense that they're not feeling that talent is driving any change, or it's sort of not beneficial. But actually, I think it needs to be looked at from a wider perspective, and I think from a cultural perspective. I think if you are in an environment where you are allowed to make mistakes, where you are allowed to really explore innovation through your creativity, and you can do that and feel very comfortable in your environment, I think that is the key. I think from a cultural perspective, there are lots of businesses that almost have the mindset of, well, we pay you X amount and we're giving you this technology. Go on, make it work now. It has to work first time. We haven't got time to explore innovations. We haven't got time to trial and test. No, we need it right the first time. And that is not, to me, a positive or a growth-focused environment. And I think culture very much underpins when you're looking at why is talent not working for you, why, if a company is sitting there and saying, well, we have all these great people, well, why isn't it working? I think the company needs to take a harder look at themselves internally and look at how they're set up and how they allow people to go through development and training. And an old cliche of being yourself and really allowing your creativity to work without any constraint or worry of what happens if it doesn't work first time.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting segue into the whole organizational challenge, because one of the things that really stood out to me when we asked the question about what are the main challenges that brands are facing due to this lack of customer experience strategy. And I would have expected to see things like kind of a loss of revenue or increased cost or not ability to innovate. But actually, the number one challenge that kind of people highlighted was this continued lack of support for our organization. And would you agree that that's kind of the internal challenges are more significant than the external ones?
100%. I would absolutely agree with that. I think almost the benefit of the external challenges is that you're not the only person going through that challenge, whether it's within your industry or within your profession. So for me, I know that if I'm having a purely retail focused challenge, other retailers are having that. Same from the marketing perspective. So I know that it's not just myself that's going to be trying to find solutions. It's going to be a whole wealth of super intelligent people and clever people who are going to be trying to find these solutions and drive growth and innovation. I think, so from an external perspective, they're hard, don't get me wrong, but you're not alone with them. Internally, you are almost. They're very unique. So for my position at the minute, yes, we're in administration. We're not the first companies to go in administration. It's not our first administration. Lots of companies are in administration at the minute, but the challenges that poses for us are very unique to us. So like we said, sort of before we kicked in with it, my biggest challenge at the minute and what I'm most preoccupied is developing and growing within an administration, not necessarily the COVID challenges that are happening external to the environment. Yes, they're happening and they're challenging, but they're not the biggest challenge. And I think bringing it back to what we were discussing around the culture element of it, I think if a business is not set up internally to really be strong against external challenges and to mitigate those through their strengths internally, they're either not going to survive or they're going to spend the whole time firefighting, keeping their heads above water. If you can get your in-house really strong, and that means focusing on leadership and development within your workforce, focusing on talent retention through development and training, focus on creating a safe space and a culture. If you can do that internally, then whatever's happening externally, you are in the best position to fight that and to get through that. And I think, we're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of the businesses that haven't survived because of COVID or are really struggling to survive because of COVID are the businesses that weren't ready for it internally. And they didn't have almost their internal armor ready to go against COVID because one, they didn't think anything like that would happen, but two, also it's not ever been a focus to focus on that culture. I think something like COVID hits, a lot of people reassess what they're doing with their lives in generally and what they want from their life. There's been a lot of movement in terms of workforces, and people are saying, "Oh, it's a very strange time to be moving jobs and roles. Why would you do that in a pandemic?" But actually, a lot of people have realized what they want from their life and from their work. And I think the idea of flexible working, remote working, focusing on leadership, how companies have responded to these challenges, but from a HR perspective almost, it's the companies that haven't done that in the right way that are losing their talent. Their talent leaving the businesses means, again, it's almost like a levels of how ready are you for any challenges, and they're just going down and down the more they're not reacting to external challenges as well. So I 100% think internal challenges are much more significant and pose a much greater threat than the external challenges.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sophia. And I think I wish all retailers in UK to have a bit of Sophie in their marketing teams, because very admirable to see how positive and how motivated you are to tackle this challenge head on. So thank you so much.